Moving on, what the Ahmaud Arbery case is, from my perspective, is the Second Amendment is on trial. You know, the ability to decide where is the line when you decide that you feel like you need to defend your home and defend your community from intruders. That is what's on trial. But also what's on trial here, again, is the history. There is history here. And while it's not taught, and they are fighting it mightily in places like Texas and Florida and all across all the red states across the country, the teaching of CRT, critical race theory, talk about structures, and in order to talk about that, you have to talk about the history of race and racism in this country. And the fact of the matter is that one of the reasons why people don't understand or don't know that there's history here is because it's not being taught. That history is on trial, in my view, because, as I've said, I just read out the history. It goes back 100+ years. Back in the day, you could have had a riot based on what was done to Ahmaud Arbery here. I mean, Emmett Till, Trayvon Martin, going forward. So, because, and again, this is not a police officer, right? Although these guys are wannabe cops, some claim to have some law enforcement background. Travis McMichael is on the stand, which we'll talk about. He claimed to have background, which I think hurt him. But the main thing here is, again, do people have a right to, quote unquote, question and detain people? There is something that's very interesting. This is from Stephanie Rule on MSNBC today. And this lawyer makes a very interesting point about the law in Georgia. And my understanding is that this law goes way back. And I'm going to play this and talk about it when they stop, when he's done. And then I want to come back to Rule, because her show ended at the beginning of closing arguments and the prosecution going off. I want to go over that. I'm going to play that, and then I'm going to go to the testimony of McMichael.
Sitting in that very same seat, and said the prosecution in the Rittenhouse trial had a very difficult case on their hands. How do you assess this one?
Most folks are expecting, at least I think, this case to be more of a slam dunk for the prosecution. But I would caution folks that in Georgia, even though there's plenty of evidence that these defendants, the Arbery defendants, went to the trouble, they got in their car, they chased down Ahmaud Arbery. On the other hand, at the time, Georgia had a very broad liberal citizens arrest statute that has since been amended. But that law dated back to the mid-1860s.
A citizens arrest for doing what?
So at the time, Georgia gave someone a privilege to go chase someone and arrest them and detain them if they believed that they were fleeing from a felony. And that's why you see so much evidence in this case that the prosecution's putting in that there was no felony, that he was just entering a home and looking around, that it was merely a trespass. But that citizen's arrest is a factor in this case that was not a factor in the Rittenhouse case. So there is a possibility for acquittal if the defendants can convince a jury that they were lawfully performing a citizen's arrest and then they were attacked by Arbery. Still an uphill climb by most observers' assessments.
Tali, the prosecution goes first. Closing argument.
Sorry. Just remembering that, because that is significant in what comes next. Because you're going to see in this closing argument, this argument about the so-called citizen's arrest. I'm going to play this out. This is at the end of Stephanie Rule. So this was this morning. Prosecutor is already beginning the closing arguments. So let's listen to this.
Are underway in the trial of 3 men accused of killing Ahmaud Arbery. Let's listen in.
How fast did he shoot him? How fast did he just pull that trigger? They shot and killed Ahmaud Arbery. They all acted as a party to the crime. You'll note they've been indicted that way. And I'm going to talk about what party to a crime is so that you understand that concept. But the bottom line is, but for their actions, but for their decisions, but for their choices, Ahmaud Arbery would be alive. And that's why they've been indicted with murder, felony murder, and the 4 felonies that led to the murder. So what is the defense? I mean, I'm just going to take it right down there. We talked about that. What is the defense?
Let me just say that felony murder is one of these things that I don't think that people can fully appreciate. Because felony murder means is that, and I guess this is, I don't think this is I don't think this is federal law. I think this is state law. I'm not sure. But I remember they had it in California, and I think here in New York. And that is, if you're with somebody who commits a felony, and that felony results in the death of somebody, it becomes murder, right? So in other words, if you're a purse snatcher and you grab a woman's purse and run, and she's an elderly person, and because you've yanked that out of her hand, you've also pulled her forward and she falls, hits her head and dies, you can get murder for that. So while Travis McMichael is the actual shooter who killed Ahmaud Arbery, the other two who are a party to this are up for felonies because they were a part of this whole thing. So they all get murder, basically. It's something that I've said before, because particularly when you are talking about protests that end up with burning of buildings and of houses and all this, and of cars and all these kinds of things. What I don't think people understand, they want to get their frustrations out or whatever. If somebody dies in a building because it's on fire and they're in the back of that building doing work, and nobody knows that person's back there, and they throw a Molotov cocktail and burn that building down, and that person dies in the back, the fact that you didn't know that person was there does not matter. If you were with the person who threw that Molotov cocktail in there, that person who threw it in there is responsible for murder. And anybody who is with that person, egging them on, pointing at the building, saying that one, if you smashed out the glass and as that allowed that Molotov cocktail to go in there, all of you are up for murder. That is pretty, so that's how you can end up one person doing the actual killing and 10 other people end up in jail for murder for life. Felony murder. I wish people would get that, particularly young people who decide to go out there and understand that, especially young black people. You you think you're throwing some kind of a Molotov cocktail into an empty car or whatever, and it burns up. You don't realize that there's somebody sleeping in the back seat. So when people talk about, their property, it's, people care more about property than they do about human lives. Because you don't know what's going on with that property. Suppose you throw a Molotov cocktail into a building and it hits a gas line that has started leaking and the people in the building didn't know, and that building blows up. And it then sets a fire that catches in throughout the entire, neighboring buildings, and a number of people die. Are you kidding me? All of those people who were involved in that could be up for murder. And that's how you end up packing the jails full of, a bunch of black folks who were just dumb and stupid and shouldn't have been there and were caught up in the moment and decided, they wanted to be a part of this whole thing. And they're just getting out their steam and all this kind of stuff. And one person can condemn 20 people to murder. Continuing on.
So we got self-defense. What is that? Well, they're going to try and convince you that Ahmaud Arbery was the attacker, that he was somehow threatening to them. 3-on-1, 2 pickup trucks, 2 guns. Mr. Aubry, nothing in his pockets. Not a cell phone, not a gun, not even an ID. They want you to believe that he is the danger to them. And Mr. Rubin said it in the opening statement. He was scary. So here's the thing. They're going to try to claim that they were justified in their actions. Okay? Because here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. You cannot claim self-defense under certain circumstances. You can't. You don't get to say, I was acting in self-defense, and there's 3 of them, and it's the law. This isn't just something made up. There's 3 of them in the law, okay? If you are the initial unjustified aggressor, you don't get to claim self-defense. If you're committing a felony against somebody, you don't get to claim self-defense. And the 3rd one is if you provoke somebody so that they defend themselves against you, and then you go, oh, look, he attacked me first. But you really were the one who was provoking the attack on yourself. You don't get to claim self-defense. And that's the law. So, here's the problem. They're going to try and claim they were justified in starting this in their driveways. They're going to try and claim they were justified in committing all these felonies against Mr. Arbery. How? Because they're going to try and convince you that this was a citizen's arrest. That's what they're going to do. But
now remember that whole notion of the citizen's arrest, right? The lawyer just talked about that with Stephanie Rule earlier. The citizen's arrest, the law allows a citizen to go out there and arrest somebody. Here's how she begins to dismantle that. It's interesting.
Citizen's arrest really is. Okay? This is what the law says. This is the statute, and the judge is going to give it to you. A private person may arrest an offender if the offense is committed in his presence. Right here, right now, I'm seeing you do it. Okay? Right here, right now, I'm watching you commit the crime. I'm witnessing it. You're doing it in my presence. So what's the problem for the defendants? Well, we all know that Mr. Bryan's on his porch fixing it. Where's Travis McMichael? He's on the sofa inside the house. Where's Greg McMichael? This all started when I saw him running down the street. Now, it also says, or within his immediate knowledge. Well, the judge is going to charge you that that's synonymous. It means the same thing. So you got to think about, well, in my immediate knowledge, what does that mean? Think about the eye in the sky, you know, at Walmart. Like you're in Walmart, right? And you see all those things in the ceiling. You know there's a guy in a booth watching a bunch of video cameras, right? So he's not standing next to the person shoplifting, right? When she shoplifts, right? What's he doing? He's watching it on the camera. That's immediate knowledge. He's not right there next to the person shoplifting, but he's watching it. So he has immediate knowledge because he can see it eye in the sky. That's just an example, how to think of immediate knowledge. But immediate knowledge and in your presence is the exact same thing. In order to make an arrest of an offender, the offense has to be committed in the private citizen's presence. Do we have that here? No. In addition, you will be charged, this is the second line, if the offense is a felony. So once again, the offense has to be a felony. The judge is going to charge you. Criminal trespass and loitering and prowling are misdemeanors. Okay? I'm going to pause right now. I'm going to ask you to read the criminal trespass thing. In order to be a criminal trespasser, you have to enter on the property with the intent to do an unlawful act, or somebody has to have told you you can't come back here, like Larry English or his representative. Well, Mr. Aubry was never told, don't come back here. You're not allowed. This is private property. He was never told, so he doesn't fall under criminal trespass. Now, I don't want you guys to make the mistake of thinking that we're endorsing, kind of, or not acknowledging what Mr. Aubry was doing. I mean, let's get real. All right, what was Mr. Aubry doing? He's going on to somebody else's private property. Yeah. What was he doing? We can see it. Wandering around for a few minutes each time. Right? And then what would he do? He'd leave. On video, never took anything, never damaged anything. So ladies and gentlemen, you decide. Is he this giant burglar who just happened to never show up with a bag or any means to steal anything? All right? Or is he a looky-loo? Yeah, a looky-loo who's going in there at night. He shouldn't be doing that. I mean, we all know this, okay? But it's trespass. It's a misdemeanor. And on February 23rd, 2020, none of the defendants knew that he had been inside in broad daylight, that location. And what did he do on the 23rd of February? Did the same thing he always did. Wandered around,
This is one of the interesting things. Larry English, just so that in case people don't know, he is the owner of the home under construction that Ahmaud Arbery was going into.
And then left and ran off down the street. But they didn't know that. They had no immediate knowledge of that. It wasn't in their presence. Travis McMichael was on the couch. Mr. Bryan's in front of his house. Greg McMichael, you saw, he can't even see down the road. There's that trailer there. Remember the drone video? Citizen's arrest. This was not a citizen's arrest. Not present when any crime was committed. The suggestion that Ahmaud committed a crime is based on what? Not immediate knowledge, speculation. Speculation. How do we know? Because of the defendant's own words to the police. That's how we know. Wanting to question Ahmaud demonstrates uncertainty. Hey, where are you coming from? They don't know where he's coming from. What are you doing? They don't know what he's doing. Remember Mr. Bryan heard, what'd you steal? Okay? They don't know what he's done. They don't know why he's out there running. They don't have immediate knowledge. They have no knowledge. They have speculation because he's running down the street. Wanting to question Ahmaud demonstrates a lack of immediate knowledge, which is required under the citizen's arrest law. Because it's required, that means this was not a lawful citizen's arrest. Remember what Greg McMichael said? Did this guy break into this house today? I don't know. But hey, law enforcement officers, I'm sure he must have committed some crime today, so why don't you go out and figure out what crime it was that he must have committed today? Why do they think he must have committed something? Because he's running down the street. He might have gone into somebody's house. Pure speculation. And after he's lying there dead, Greg McMichael's there telling the police, hey, why didn't you investigate? So I'm sure he committed some crime today. That's not a citizen's arrest.
This is interesting, this part of this. And again, I'm going to go over the McMichael. That's this guy right here. I'm going to go over his testimony. Travis, I think the Greg McMichael is the father who was already there. That's Travis who's on the stand and starts to, and it's quite funny, starts to try and disavow everything he told the police 2 hours after it happened, because now he has an even better recollection of what really happened some months later. And I want to take a look at that also, because that to me is somewhat fascinating. But you have to realize that, there was a time in this country, and this is one reason why I liken it to white supremacy, because white nationalism really is because there was a time in this country where a white person could assume things about a black person. You could see a black person walk the street and decide that there's no way that black person could afford that jacket he's wearing. There's no way if has shopping bags or whatnot, how's that black guy able to afford that? And you had cases in history where a white person would follow a black person because they look suspicious or because they appear that they can't afford what it is they have. Listen, police, how many times there was big cases in the New Jersey Turnpike of the number of cops who would pull over blacks who were driving in expensive cars because of the notion that they can't afford that car. They couldn't afford that vehicle. So they've got to be drugs. They've got to be doing drugs. They've got to be dealers. They've got to be selling drugs, right? So the whole idea, and that's police. Now you have here actual citizens who are also doing this. They're walking around. There's no way he could be just walking around, and maybe he's interested in interior design. They don't know him. They don't know anything. Maybe he has a relationship with Larry English, the owner. Maybe he's interested in architecture. Maybe he's thinking he could sell some services to the owner. Maybe he's seen something in the home that might be a danger that the owner might want to know, might be able to talk to him about. No, couldn't possibly be that. Has to be he's a criminal. He's a criminal element, and there is a lot which I think we'll go over briefly. I actually cut it out. There's stuff on social media with him that is like kind of useless, but there is all of this fear that there is all of this crime going on. It's like a crime wave in their community. Saw that in Trayvon Martin. George Zimmerman decided to become cop for the day because of all of this crime. They're overrun with crime in their minds. Speculation. But that's what's going on here in this part. And she's answering that, which I think is excellent. She's answering this whole idea of, what is going on here? Why is this guy here? What is he doing? As a defense to him trying to detain and arrest him.
Not legitimate at all. So what are you going to hear?
I hate to interrupt closing argument, but the state is misstating the citizen's arrest law repeatedly in this section of its argument. And I'd like the court to instruct the jury that the law will come from the court. This is not an accurate statement of it.
The court is going to charge the jury on the law, and as indicated, you'll have a copy of that charge with you to review during your deliberations in the state.
Thank you. Judge is going to charge you these exact words. Judge is going to charge you these exact words. So what are you going to hear? The state suspects that what you're going to hear from the defense is this, that Travis McMichael had probable cause to believe that Ahmaud stole the stuff off the English's boat in 2019 and was escaping that felony on February 23rd, 2020. Not really sure how you escape on February 23rd, 2020 from a crime you supposedly committed on some unknown date in 2019 that Travis McMichael's mom told him about. But basically, we have this where he came in, took the stand, and said, yeah, that's what was going on. So I was going to go ahead and arrest him for this. Here's the problem. This was completely made up for trial because no one anywhere at any time ever mentioned Larry English's boat. Never. On February 23rd, 2020. Travis McMichael had 2 hours and 45 minutes to talk to the police. He was given an hour to write a 3-page statement. An hour to write it down. Never, ever, ever once said anything about this. So what can you go ahead and assume? A year and 9 months later. Completely made up for trial. All right, so simply put, ladies and gentlemen, if you determine that this was not a citizen's arrest, this was not legitimate, he had no probable cause, you can't do this based on the law, then guess what? They're not justified in killing him. They're not justified in any of the felonies they committed against him. Not a citizen's arrest. Therefore, you're not justified. You're the initial aggressor. You're committing felonies, self-defense, and that gets us to the charges in the indictment. So that's what we're looking at here.
All right. So let me get over because they start going into the weeds, and I got to get to this before too much time passes by. But I thought the prosecution, this is why, by the way, people are saying that this seems to be much more open and shut, this case. Because when you have a good prosecution like you do out of this woman, it really does come across as, in my view, fairly open and shut. Because, and again, it's the mentality of the community there. Like, what are they thinking in this area? You know, do they believe that that law is sufficient? That it should be, that you have to do all of this work to prove that a person is committing a crime, as opposed to if you've got a really damn good gut feeling, right? The gut feeling, you should be able to go out there and detain somebody, right? It's not even about, at this point in time, what the statute says. It's about how people really view the statute And that goes into Second Amendment. I think that goes into a lot of other things. But there's a lot of this stuff which, I think that the prosecutor was excellent. One of my biggest problems is that she appeared to be, I don't know if she wasn't as organized or whatever, but in order to use statements against the defendant, she appeared to take huge chunks of time to go find different things, to go to look it up, to read back to the same, because as you're going to see, McMichael, and this is the actual shooter of Ahmaud Arbery. This is the actual killer. He has almost completely disavowed the statement that he made to the police 2 hours later. And as she is stating, it's that statement is no longer convenient. That statement no longer works for them to be able to retroactively claim that this is a citizen's arrest, because they need to have more in order to detain somebody. And she goes over this chapter and verse. And actually, there's, to some extent, watching it initially, it seemed to me to be like, why is she allowing this, that, and the other thing? But I think it's a very technical, I think, prosecution. She walks him through every single thing that happened, that he did, explain it to me, and all that kind of stuff. She doesn't try to make conclusions. She just walks him through it. So this is an edited portion of it. It is long. I am going to fast forward through areas because I don't have that much time, since I didn't think that they would begin closing arguments as early as they did, but they did, and I wanted to show that first so that you could get an idea of what's going on. I imagine we're probably at the defense is maybe giving their arguments now. I don't know, but this is happening really quickly. I suspect that the jurors want to get the hell out of there before Thanksgiving. So I think you're going to have a decision, if not today, by tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest. I think this is so cut and dry that if they don't have a decision, if they get it by noon, East Coast time, noon or 1, if they don't have a decision by the end of today or early tomorrow, I think it's very problematic for the prosecution. I think this is a very big problem. The other thing I want to talk about just briefly, and I've said this before, and again, it might be controversial because we want to see these things in kind of a black and white notion, but these guys are not racists out of the 1950s and 1940s. This is not a person who I believe is a Klan member or is, looking to go around killing people. The father might be, because he's there's text messages and whatnot exchanges where he seems to admit that the father's a little bit crazy. But this is the kind of racism that I think exists in the modern era, where it's not overt. It is, and this is what critical race theory would teach us and talk to us about. It is more about what I've talked about on this podcast, exploitation and whatnot, about the idea and the feeling that as a white male, you should be able to implement the law as you see it. And if you are somebody who is in a community where you feel or see that is being overrun or besieged by foreigners, by people who don't belong there, you immediately become suspicious. Add to the fact that there are these reports of criminal activity. I'm only showing the prosecution's cross. I'm not showing any of the stuff from the defense and defendant and all that kind of stuff. Why? Because I don't have the time to do it. So this is going to be biased towards that. But I'll just say that there is a whole lot of this testimony about how people are complaining about burglaries in the area. The McMichaels, they go out and they become like citizen patrols. They start walking around and they encounter people. McMichael himself, the young one, encounters a white guy who he suspects is a drug addict, tried to break into his car. He suspects someone tried to steal his gun. He suspects they encounter a guy who's fishing underneath a bridge somewhere, and they encounter him and they confront him and all that kind of stuff. So there is already this sense that these guys are citizen cops. These guys are or are taking up the neighborhood police, not unlike George Zimmerman in the Trayvon Martin trial. These guys have decided that either the police are too busy or they are not giving this enough time and energy and whatever. There's a testimony that although the community was claiming there's all this crime, there was only one crime reported to the police in all of this time. Which, of course, the defense in the back and forth between the two counsels was saying that we need more proof to show that people were really scared. They were really terrified of all the crime, the building crime. So anyway, so let me go into this right now so that we can talk about this. And again, this is from Friday. This is from day 11. Because on Thursday when he started it was all defense, and then towards the end of it was the prosecution's opportunity. This is all from Friday of last week. I believe it was Friday, and this is where it begins, and I'm going to go over areas as needed.
All right, so you personally first saw Ahmaud Arbery as he was running ahead of you on Burford.
That's correct.
Okay. And you were driving behind him in the white F-150 pickup truck.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And at that time, when you first saw him, he didn't have a bag, did he?
No, ma'am.
Didn't have a backpack.
He did not.
Wasn't carrying a box.
Wasn't.
Okay. And you could see his hands as he ran.
Yes.
Okay. And you could see that he was wearing the cargo shorts and the t-shirt.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. And you didn't know who he was. I mean, you didn't know him personally.
I didn't know him personally. No, ma'am.
Okay. You didn't know his name.
No, ma'am.
All right. Didn't know anything about him.
Nothing.
He didn't know you.
Not that I'm aware of.
You just knew that he was the guy who was on video at the open unsecured construction site.
That I saw on the 11th.
And at this point in time, when you first see him on Burford, he's not reaching into his pockets.
No, ma'am. Not running. No, ma'am.
And he never yelled at you guys.
No, ma'am.
Never threatened you at all.
No, ma'am.
Never brandished any weapons.
Sorry, Your Honor, he's trying to finish his answer.
Yeah, he did not threaten me verbally. No, ma'am.
All right. Didn't brandish any weapons.
No, ma'am.
Didn't pull out any guns.
No, ma'am.
Didn't pull out any knife.
No, ma'am.
Never reached for anything, did he?
No.
He just ran.
Yes, he was just running.
So at this point in time, you catch up to him.
This is, I think, why most defense attorneys don't want to put their clients on the stand, because this is really, surgical as to, and she goes back to this theme over and over again. This man was not a threat to you in any way, shape, or form. Never threatened you, never said anything to you, didn't have a weapon, didn't have a gun. All he had were these cargo pants, and he's just running. And you decide to follow him.
On Burford by pulling up next to him. Is that right?
Yes, pulling alongside, keeping with my window right there. I did.
So as he's running down the street, say this is the street, he's on this side of the road, consistent with someone driving forward, or is he on that side of the road looking at oncoming traffic?
Oncoming traffic.
Okay. So he's on the side for oncoming traffic.
That's correct.
All right. So you pull up next to him. Is that right?
Yes.
You startled him.
No.
Are you a mind reader?
I'm not, but I could see his actions, the way that he didn't veer, he didn't run off. I came up to him slowly, just like I would anybody else, and I've never startled anybody doing that before. Anybody walking or jogging or running. I've never had anybody become startled on that, so I don't know why it would be.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. How many times have you pulled up on strangers that you don't know next to them with a pickup truck to ask them what they're doing in your neighborhood?
I don't think I have in that situation, but I have pulled up on people that are running behind, coming up behind them.
So this is where you really got to be somebody who is putting themselves in that position. Again, what's going to help the prosecution, in my view, is if they can put themselves in the mindset of Ahmaud Arbery. If they continue remaining in the mindset of this guy, prosecution's in trouble. But if you begin to think that I'm Ahmaud Arbery and I'm jogging, and this guy pulls up behind me and surprises me, that's reasonable or unreasonable.
What?
I say, hey, what's going on? Hold on a second.
All right. And he didn't say anything back to you?
No, ma'am.
All right. He just kept running?
He stopped and turned and went backwards. That was the first time. That was the one caught on Mr. Roddy's or Mr. Brian's video. Was turned out to be the first qualification.
Okay, so hold on. You pull up next to him, he stops, and then he turns and starts running this way. Back down Burford towards Satilla.
Yes.
And then you back up. Is that right?
I did.
So you back up the truck to follow him, and at some point in time, what do you say to him at that point?
I'm asking him, what are you doing? What's going on? What happened down there? Why is there somebody, I ask him why there's somebody pointing down the road. As I'm talking, that's when he turns and runs back down Burford.
Now, how ridiculous is this? Let me just say, how ridiculous is this? And she goes on to talk about it a little bit. But here is a guy who's pulling up to him. He doesn't say, excuse me, sir, or pardon me, sir, or anything like that. His response is, hey, what's going on? Stop. What's going on here? What's going on? Absolutely absurd. But again, this is white nationalism. This is the mindset. And I don't say that to say that this guy is a cross-burning racist. But what I am saying is that part of the conservatism and part of this, the embedded racism that exists in people is they see threats around every corner from people of color, particularly from black people. And they believe that they have a right to stop somebody, ask them questions, and if that person is not compliant, then they're automatically suspected of doing something. That is an indication that they're up to no good because they won't answer my questions, right? He believes now that he has the right to stop and detain somebody and pepper them with questions. The prosecution goes right after that notion with respect to the Fifth Amendment, and I thought it was excellent.
So now you're asking him, hey, why is somebody pointing down the road? That's what you're asking him?
That's what I was trying to get to ask him why there are people pointing down the road.
All right, Mr. McMichael, not asking for generalities and what's in your head. I want to know exactly what you were saying to the man jogging down the street. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. What exactly did you say to him the first time you pulled up to him?
I want to talk to you.
And he turned and ran.
He stopped, turned, and then went the other direction.
Okay. And that was an indication to you that he didn't want to talk to you?
Yes.
That was an indication he was not going to stop for you?
Yes.
Okay. And at that point in time, you chose to put your truck in reverse and back up at him.
Back up along with him.
So he's trying to get away from you, doesn't want to stop, doesn't want to talk, and you're backing up to go along with him.
That's correct.
And at some point in time then, he turns to run up Burford, right?
Yes, I've asked him again, or asked him that I wanted to talk to him. I don't know exactly what I said, but it was to the effect that I want to talk to him and what happened down the road.
And at this point in time, you're not wearing any sort of uniform.
No, ma'am.
You're not in a marked patrol car.
I'm not.
You don't have any badges on your sleeves.
I do not.
And when you told the police, you were talking to them about Do you remember telling the police? So I pull up to him and say, hey.
There's a lot of edits here, as you can see with the, it's called the mosaic transition. There's a lot of edits here because, like I was saying earlier, this prosecutor was going through the notes to try and find out his exact statements. And that, to me, ruined the flow of her questions. I mean, we're talking about 2 to 5 minutes of her stopping to go through notes. I know if I'm a juror, I'm starting to fall asleep at that point in time. So it was unfortunate that she had a good flow going, good narrative going, and could put you right in that place. And then she stops for 2 minutes, 5 minutes. It was an unfortunate, in my view, part of her cross-examination.
You know what's going on. He's running. He won't stop. I said, that's him. Stop right there. I'm at the bottom of page 8, top of page 9. Stop right there. Stop where you're at. Do you remember telling the police that that's what you said?
That's what's on here. Yes, ma'am. You want me to read it?
I'm just asking you if that's what you said. You said, what's going on? He won't stop. I said, that's him. Stop right there. Stop where you're at.
Yeah, that's part of it.
All right. So at this point, you're ordering him to stop. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say ordering. I was asking him.
Like nicely and politely, please, sir, stop?
At first, it was not please, sir, but hey, can you stop? Please, yes, stop for a second. Stop for a second. My voice inflection and tone, I was trying to keep the situation calm.
And this is at the time that he's already decided that he doesn't want anything to do with you and has run back down Burford towards Satilla.
Yes.
All right. And then we see what happens in the Night Owl video. Is that right? Is that what happens next?
Brian, yes. Yes, around that time. Yes.
You're backing up, and then he's running away from you.
Yes, ma'am.
And then is this...
Again, this is going to be about, if the prosecution wins, this is going to be about is the jury willing to be in the mindset of Ahmaud Arbery? Or are they going to stay in the mindset of this guy, Travis McMichael? Because, and this is where race plays a huge part of this whole thing. Because if a black person doesn't have a right to be able to not be accosted by a white stranger, then what are we talking about here, right? Because that's exactly what's going on. This guy is harassing Ahmaud Arbery at this point in time. And, this idea was, well, I was saying it nicely. Come on. Give me a break. He's saying, stop, I want to talk to you nicely. No, sir, no, please. Magic words.
Your truck pulling forward after him?
It is, yes, ma'am.
So at this point in time, you could have just stopped, right?
I could have.
You could have just let him run, correct?
I could have, but I also wanted to make sure that everything was okay down the road and see what was happening. I wanted to at least ask him what was happening and see what he would say and go from there.
Despite the fact that you know about the Fifth Amendment, you know that no one has to talk to anyone they don't want to talk to, right?
That's correct.
And you said that you wanted to know what had happened and that you saw Matt Albenzi out in the street when you came out with your shotgun from your house, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You didn't go down and ask Mr. Albenzi what was going on, did you?
I did not.
Okay. So at one point in time, I think you said you thought, well, maybe somebody had been hurt or something had been broken into, or maybe Larry English was down there, right?
That's correct.
All right. But you didn't head that way to see what exactly had happened, did you?
I did not, because Mr. Albenzi was pointing down the road. I took it as whatever happened, you need to go that way. You need to go that way. Something has happened. And then trying to ask him was to see what was happening. What happened?
Now, this is the mindset of the ability for this guy to have rights that supersede the Fifth Amendment, to supersede Mr. Arbery's right to be able to continue running, to be able to continue peacefully doing what he's doing in his day. His concern should be able to override Mr. Arbery's constitutional rights. And he's a liar. Because, as the prosecution just said, you know the guy Albenzi. He's a neighbor. You know that guy. If you're really concerned, really wondering what's going on, speak to Albenzi. Speak to that guy. If you believe that there's something that has just happened down the street, go and take a look. Mr. English or whatever, that he may have accosted somebody or whatever, go and take a look. No, he's not doing that. Instead, because Albenzi's told him to point at him that way, he immediately decides to go after, with a shotgun in his car, after Mr. Aubry. And he doesn't say at this point, he may later on, that his father has said, that's the guy, and has run for his car, right? The father has already told him that's the guy that is the criminal in his mind. So he's not trying to stop Ahmaud Arbery to ask him what's going on. That's a lie. He is trying to detain Ahmaud Arbery. And this immediately becomes a hunt. This is the hunting of Ahmaud Arbery. And I wish the prosecution had used that terminology. I know the defense would have flipped out. But this is the hunting of Ahmaud Arbery at this point in time. Because they are now after him and they're trying to corner him at a certain point in time, and that begins to play out, because the one guy who is also a defendant, who is seen on the video walking by the camera, he gets into his car and he decides that he's going to follow him from the opposite direction. And Ahmaud Arbery is now being hunted by these two cars and being boxed in, just like you would an animal. I mean, there's no different there. They've got shotguns. They've got vehicles. There's 3 of them. And they're now on the hunt to try and catch this guy.
Because something had happened.
Something has happened.
All right, so at this point, right here, where he's running, you're still yelling at him, stop. I want to talk to you, stop.
No, ma'am. Once I watched him run and then pull onside him again is when I engaged with him again.
All right, so we're talking about going all the way down Burford.
No, ma'am. It was only another 100 feet from there, maybe 200 feet. There was a wooded area right where I spoke to him again.
All right, so let's take a look at this.
May I?
Which I want to make sure you have the right exhibit number. Are you able to see that on your screen?
Yes, ma'am.
So, got the Bryan house. You said you went down here to maybe a wooded area. Is it fair to say that wooded area is right in here?
Yes, it's right at the corner of that house or lot right there.
You'd agree with me when I say that you never, ever told the Glenn County Police Department or in your written statement that you said to Mr. Aubry, the police are coming?
I don't know if I did or not. If it's not on there, then I didn't say it, but I could have missed it. From everything that was happening and writing it down 2 hours later, I might have missed it, but on the assumption that they do that, because I was still under the impression that my dad has called the police, so I'm under the impression that the cops are coming.
So talking about that, a couple hours after the homicide of Ahmaud Arbery, you basically say, he goes around the corner, comes back, he's, man, something's not right here. I tell him to stop, grab the gun out of the truck. I say, hey, stop. He runs back. Man, you call 911 yet? Find my phone, call, give it to my dad, said, call the cops, let's get the cops. So it's only after you grabbed your shotgun out of the truck at the corner of Holmes and Satilla that you say, hey, let's call the cops, and you hand the phone to your dad to call the cops.
That's when I found out that he did not call the police. When I realized that he has not called the police. And then...
So also on page 9, you never indicated that Mr. Arbery actually stopped long enough for you to have a conversation with him. Is that correct at the top of page 9?
Yes, I do. I said, he's running, he won't stop. I said, that's him. Stop right there. Stop where you're at. Call the cops, And I'm assuming, or what I'm saying there is, I told him that I called the cops. There he is. He starts acting funny, and then he takes off running. So he was stopped. If he takes off running, then he was stopped at the point.
You remember yesterday telling this jury that that's what you said to your dad? Call the cops, there he is? Do you remember telling this jury just yesterday that was what you said to your dad? Call the cops. There he is. He starts acting funny. He takes off running.
I believe I said, have you called the cops yet? And then on this here is what I mentioned to the police in the interview. And reading this and knowing how I was all over the place when I was giving that statement, this is what I was talking about. This is what I believe was what I was talking about.
But you'd agree, nowhere in here do you say that Mr. Arbery actually stopped. You said, stop right there, stop right where you're at, and he takes off running.
He takes off running.
Mm-hmm. So nowhere in here do you indicate to Detective Nohilly that he stopped long enough for you to say the police are on their way and that's why he took off running. Nowhere in here and nowhere in your written statement is that indicated.
In those terms, saying it in that verbatim, I did not. But looking at this and how I was still under stress, still under the impact of what happened a couple hours after this, just 2 hours after the shooting, and then seeing how I was talking, under stress, nervous, scared, I know what I was talking about here, and that's what I was talking about. They call the cops, Stop where you're at, call the cops.
So the prosecution is trying to say that, he's disavowing his previous statements to the police because he's trying to reconstruct, because it's now been so many years, he knows what the prosecution has on him, he knows what everyone else is saying, he's trying to reconstruct his testimony.
I just killed a man. I had blood on me still. It was the most traumatic event of my life. I was scared to death. I mean, it was the most traumatic event of my life. I don't know anybody who wouldn't be scared or stressed or terrified or anything. I mean, it was horrible.
I'm talking about giving your statement 2 hours later at a police station. You were nervous because you thought you were going to jail, right?
No. I gave them a statement. I mean, if I would have...
Somebody, you don't think you're going to jail. Is what you're saying.
I was going through an investigation. I was following the investigation.
So, you saw Officer Duggan's body cam, correct? Officer Duggan, the first officer who testified, his body cam.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. You were standing right behind Officer Duggan while all that went on, right?
Yeah, I guess. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, you've just shot Mr. Arbery 3 times with a shotgun, correct?
Correct.
He's dead on the scene, correct?
Correct.
He's unarmed, correct?
He was.
All right. And your father came up to you and grabbed you by the shoulders and went, you had no choice, right? You saw that?
Yes.
All right. You're covered in Mr. Arbery's blood. You go down to the police station, correct?
Correct.
All right. So, fair to say you never told Detective Nohilly nor wrote down in your written statement that you told Mr. Arbery the police were on their way.
It seems that I attempted to say it in these words here.
And at that point, Mr. Arbery turns around.
Why is that significant, by the way? That's significant because they are saying that the reason why Arbery must have been a criminal, because as soon as we told him the cops were on the way, he kept running. That is the implication of him trying to say now that he told Mr. Arbery that cops are on the way, and this guy tried to flee, so we had to try and detain him to keep the cops, to keep him full when the cops arrived. That is the significance of him now saying that, although, as the prosecution says, he never mentioned anything to Aubry about the police. And certainly he would not have had time because Arbery kept running to avoid him.
And runs back down Burford to get away from you, correct?
That's correct.
So at this point in time, he's running away from you. He has not threatened you.
No.
Hasn't pulled out a gun.
No, ma'am.
Hasn't pulled out a knife.
He did not.
Still arms at his sides.
That's correct.
And he's trying to get away from you.
And I was letting him run away. Yes, ma'am.
You were letting him run away.
That's correct.
So when you first pulled up to him, very first time, you confirmed it was him, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. You testified under oath to this jury that I'm not going to chase or investigate someone who is armed, right?
That's correct.
And yet you want this jury to believe now that he was a threat to you, okay, and that you perceived him as a threat, yet you continued to chase him down Burford.
I didn't know if he was a threat or not. He never reached in his pockets, and I wanted to see what was happening. I figured I could talk to him at this point, or getting up to him on the second point.
But hadn't at this point he demonstrated...
That's an interesting point that is made, and I'm not sure that it stands up legally. But again, going back to the closing arguments, in order for him to take self-defense or do the citizen's arrest, he has to have known or have seen or had strong reason to believe that a felony had just been committed, not trespass, which would have been a misdemeanor, but an actual felony, which would have been stealing or an assault, or that he just, attacked somebody or something like that and assaulted them seriously. And here he seems to be saying on the stand that he has no idea what's going on. So if that's true, the defense of self-defense and the detainment and all that kind of stuff is totally illegal. I don't know if the prosecution is getting that, but he's not doing himself any favors by responding, perhaps truthfully, but by responding and saying this. And again, it goes back to, if I'm the jury, and one of the things is if they get acquitted, does a black person in America have the right to run away, not accost anyone, not have a weapon, not attack, not scream, not yell, not say anything? This man says nothing, and all he's doing is trying to avoid him. Does that man have a right to live if he's in a certain community, if he's outside of his home? History tells us there's a big question mark around that, because I can't think of many cases where a white person has gone to jail for murder in those circumstances. I can think of a lot of cases where white people have gotten away with murder, gotten away with being prosecuted, but not even being prosecuted, but also with being able to beat a murder rap or not do time for killing somebody. I've seen that many a time. But can a person, in this case Ahmaud Arbery, be able to say, I have a right to be able to run and not answer this person's question? Does that jury believe that, or is the fear of the criminal element, the monstrous criminal element, supersede that?
Not once, not twice, but 3 times he did not want to talk to you.
When I'm at the stop, when I stop the Burford?
Mm-hmm. Right, because you pulled up to him once, he doesn't want to talk to you. You back up, he doesn't want to talk to you. You pull down Burford, your dad's yelling, cut him off, cut him off. And all of a sudden, he runs back, he doesn't want to talk to you. That's 3 times he's demonstrated to you that he does not want to talk to you, correct?
Yes.
He's also demonstrated he's no threat to you. He hasn't pulled out a gun.
That's correct.
He hasn't said one word to you.
He has not.
He's not threatened you in any way, verbally or physically.
No, ma'am.
No knives.
No knives.
All right. He's not swearing at you, using profanity or anything like that, is he?
Didn't talk.
So at this point, you get out of the truck, correct?
That's correct.
And you get out with your shotgun.
No, I got out when my father got out to get in the back, and then my shotgun slipped and was in the floorboard where my feet were all over it. Once I didn't have it in his hand.
So he didn't have it in his hand as he ran about 10 yards down the road after Mr. Arbery.
He didn't run down the road after Mr. Aubry.
So at this point, you're coming down Holmes, and you see Mr. Arbery coming toward you.
He was in the middle of a turn. He was on the right side of the road, turning left in that apex is when I saw him there. The first time I saw him on Holmes. He was in the middle of a turn, turning back towards Satilla on Holmes.
Is that what the video picks up?
I don't think so, no ma'am.
So, you're saying that you're coming down this way, and he's running toward your truck, he's turning around, and he runs back this way. You don't see the black truck at this point?
No ma'am.
All right. But then all of a sudden he's running back toward you, and you see the black truck behind him?
No. When I came around the dog leg, the black truck.
By the way, just for reference, the black truck, which he doesn't understand, or at least he doesn't seem to know, is the third guy who's on trial here. Roddy McDaniel, I believe his name is. I can't remember. But, there's three people on trial here. There is the father and son, McMichael, and then there's this guy, Roddy, who created the video and who had the video of the shooting and of the killing, which was totally to the advantage of the prosecutors. He's the guy who's on trial. He is the guy who had the video, and he is the guy who is in the black truck. Travis McMichael thinks that they're together or something, but they're not.
Truck and Mr. Aubry were together. The black truck obviously just came off of Satilla and were heading towards me on Holmes, towards Elwood.
So you're saying at this point you've made it all the way down here?
He was turning. He was on the right side of the road, turning left. When I saw him, he was in the middle of the turn, and then he turned and was out of sight around that dog leg. And I continued, and then once I got to the dog leg is when I saw him and Mr. Arbor, or the black vehicle, coming my way.
And at that point, he's pinned between the two vehicles.
He was.
So Ahmaud Arbery had no hope here. If we're just being honest, he was being hunted by these men. He's running. He's trying to do his best to get away. These two guys have pinned him in, and he basically has no hope here. He doesn't know that they have shotguns, I don't think, at this point in time. The father yells at him and says something. And again, what they're claiming that they're trying to do is to get him to stop. Is to get him to stop and to answer their questions or be detained by police. They want to do a quote-unquote citizen's arrest, which is said later on. I don't know how significant it's going to be that they were not intending to kill him. I don't think that there's anything that the prosecution has that says that they intended to kill him. What they intended to do is detain him, and the whole thing went sideways on them. They are claiming that they are using a quote-unquote citizen's arrest to do that as well. They're claiming that they had reason to believe that he was a criminal because of all the other criminal activity, none of which they can ascribe to Mr. Aubry, but that was in their mindset, right? So this is, again, why all things being equal, if we're all in a society that believes that, people have a right to not be accosted by a bunch of strangers, this should be a very easy case for the prosecution. But we're in Georgia, rural Georgia too. And as much as we like to think Georgia has changed and has modernized, it has not in certain parts. And Travis McMichael is an example of that. That all you need to do is believe a person is a criminal element for you to have enough evidence to detain them and possibly shoot and kill them if need be.
You get down to the end of here, having passed Mr. Arbery and the black truck.
No, I was at a stop and they passed me. I let Mr. Arbery run by and I let the vehicle pass me. I was stopped in the correct lane and saw them coming, and that was when Mr. Arbery and the black truck Mr. Aubry was running alongside the truck, grabbing at the mirror and the door, and then that's when they split. When they were coming into my lane, that's when they split. Mr. Aubry was on the passenger side, and the black vehicle.
There is testimony, and one of the reasons why this guy Roddy, who's in the black truck, is on trial is because there is belief that he tried to strike and knock over Mr. Aubry, tried to strike him with his car. That guy seemed to indicate that he did not do that.
And you got out of your truck?
Yes, ma'am.
You got out with the shotgun that time?
I did not.
So you got out of your truck and you yelled at him. Stop.
As he was getting close to me, yes, I was yelling at him at that point to stop. Yes, ma'am.
He turned around to run back.
He did.
Didn't threaten you in any way?
No.
Didn't verbally threaten you?
Not
like
verbally.
Yell at you?
Not verbally, no.
Didn't swear at you?
Didn't swear.
Didn't say anything?
Did not.
Didn't pull out a gun?
He did not pull out a gun.
Turned around and ran away?
Once he got from me to you, directed to me, once I reached into my truck is when he turned and ran away. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So at that point, you're reaching into your truck, and he sees you do this?
Yes.
He turns and runs away?
He did. Yes, ma'am.
So now, we see him running back, and you said he ran up around the dog leg, right?
He did. Correct.
And at that point, we see him running back down the dog leg. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So he got back to that blue mailbox and then had to turn around and headed back towards you.
I believe he was past the blue mailbox.
So he got past the blue mailbox.
Yeah, he was completely out of sight.
All right. All right, so we're going to freeze frame it right here. You've raised your shotgun at him at this point.
At that point, I did. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And he's 30 to 40 yards away from you.
That's what I put on the. That's what I said in the statement and wrote, I believe. Thinking back on it now, I think it was 30 to 40 feet. It was closer to 30, 40 yards. It was 30, 40 yards, 120 feet. He was not that far away from me.
All right. And at this point right here, hasn't said anything to you?
No, he has not said anything yet. No, ma'am.
Hasn't verbally threatened you?
Verbally, no.
Still running with his hands at his sides?
Directly towards me, yes, ma'am.
Hasn't pulled out a gun?
Hasn't seen a gun weapon yet, no, ma'am.
And hasn't shown you a weapon this entire time?
He has not.
Hasn't said a word the entire time?
Not one time.
All he's done is run away from you?
Run past me, yes, ma'am.
And you pulled out a shotgun and pointed it at him?
Running directly towards me, and this is now the second time on the road coming directly, and then watching how he interacted with the pickup truck.
That's where I believe that the intimidation aspect of this is, right? Because you can't, just like with Kyle Rittenhouse and the prosecution was trying to get out there, you cannot intimidate a person with your weapon and then claim self-defense. You have to, you have to be defending yourself with that weapon. So that is where Aubry hasn't done anything. He's just coming towards him, and that is where he pulls out the shotgun, and points it at him. I think that is intimidation. That is what the prosecution is trying to argue, and he's just helped him.
Impression Is that right? You were under the impression, because of all those things that you just mentioned, that what? That he could be a threat to you?
Yes.
All right. Your father is in the pickup truck, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And he has his .357 Magnum, correct?
He has it, yes.
All right. And this is when you finally have given him the phone and said, call 911.
Seconds before this is when I dialed 911 after I realized that I was misunderstood, that he has not called 911 or had not called 911, and realized the error and called, and then gave my dad the phone once I saw Mr. Arbery coming back at me this third time. Gave it to him, once he was coming around that dogleg. Yes, ma'am.
And your father had 30 years of law enforcement, is that correct?
I believe so.
All right. So, and he knows how to take care of himself, doesn't he?
He knows how.
Huh. I know. And he's got a handgun with him, right?
Yes.
And he's on higher ground, isn't he?
Yes. Yeah, I would say higher ground. I'd say vulnerable.
And you never once, anywhere in your police statement, said you were ever worried about your father or him being attacked at all. Never said that once in any of your statements.
In the statements, I guess not. No, ma'am.
So at this point, you and your dad are both yelling at Mr. Arbery to stop.
I am yelling. I'm sure my dad is, but I was not paying attention to what my father was saying.
All right, so at this point in time, you are right next to your pickup truck in the doorway, right?
I'm right in the crux of it. Yes, ma'am.
All right. All right. And Mr. Aubry is moving this way, and then he's moving that way, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you have now moved yourself out of that crux to the doorway into the roadway. Is that right?
Yes, because when I drew down on him, and then because he was coming directly toward me, focused in on me, and I drew down on him, he immediately broke his direction and went to the right. When he went to the right, I came to the left to gain distance. I was thinking that what I would do, or anybody else, would go across the yard, would run across the yard. Well, as I was going across, I saw that he turned and started directing towards me on the road again, and then turned a third time and then went back to the side of the vehicle. So I was trying to gain distance.
Gain distance. So you're expecting that he should take action to get away from you because you're pointing a shotgun at him.
I was not wanting him to come to charge me, to attack me, which I was assuming was happening. Yes, that's exactly what I was doing.
So him running down this road, being pursued by Mr. Bryan's truck, is him attacking you.
The last time that I saw Mr. Bryan's truck was when I was at a stop just before where I'm at now, and he was was all over that truck. And
notice how in this testimony he really does not, and I didn't go into it, I didn't play it because there's more of it, but he is ascribing all of this negative stuff to Ahmaud Arbery, and he doesn't see himself or anybody else as behaving more irrationally than him. They're not at all spending any time thinking about, is their behavior rational or irrational.
So I'm on alert. He turns, runs off, comes back. I'm sure I saw Mr. Bryan's truck in this instance, but I was focused on what I perceived as the threat. So I don't even remember the question now.
Well, I think the question is, you didn't know what he was doing except continuing to run away from Mr. Bryan's truck.
No, he was coming towards me.
All right, but you just said, who knows what? You didn't know what this guy was going to do, right?
I did not.
And all he had done so far is run away from you, right?
He has ran past me and ran away, and I let him run away, yes. Yes.
But at this time, You're not letting him run away. You're pointing a shotgun at him, correct?
I am not letting him run to me, directly to me.
And he doesn't. He runs around there, right?
He did.
Mm-hmm. And comes around that corner, and you have closed the distance yourself on him, haven't you?
I have gone to the front of my truck. I did not go to the passenger side of my truck at that time. I was trying to keep an eye on him to make sure that he didn't try to get in my truck or try to get to my dad or who knows, go into the passenger side or what. I was trying to keep an eye on him, and I would think that he's avoided me once I aimed the shotgun at him. If he sees me at the front of the truck, then he will not come back around, which I was thinking was more than likely was going to happen, and then he would continue to go.
So at this point in time, you could have stepped closer to your pickup truck and kept that pickup truck between you and him, correct?
Can you say that again?
Sure thing. You have moved out in the road. You've aimed this shotgun at Mr. Arbery.
I did.
Mr. Arbery goes to the passenger side of the truck.
Yes.
Okay. Your dad is still yelling at him because we can hear him go, "Stop, goddammit, stop!" Right?
Yes.
You could have easily just stepped back to your pickup truck and watched him keep going, right?
I could have, yes, but I still didn't know what he could have done right there where I couldn't see him.
So this is where the question of compassion, like, you know, the guy is doing everything, Ahmaud Arbery is doing everything to get away and around these guys. And yet this guy cannot bring himself to, at any point in time during this whole thing, and the prosecution is doing an excellent job by having him go step by step through this entire process, which I think is what prosecutors love. This is almost classic, I think, cross-examination. Police do, I think, this as well. But at no point in time can this guy ever give Ahmaud Arbery the benefit of the doubt and decide, you know what, let's de-escalate this, right? He's got a crazy father who's in the back of the truck bed with a gun, a 357 Magnum, which is a high-powered pistol, gun. He's got a shotgun, and you got a guy who is he has just witnessed this guy use his vehicle as a weapon, trying to knock Aubry off the road, right? And yet he still is doing everything he can to put himself into the situation and not de-escalate anything. That's the same thing with Rittenhouse's case, wherein you got this stupid kid out there and you got adults out there and nobody ever goes, get this kid out of here. He doesn't belong here. This is we got too much going on, too many weapons. He don't need to be in. He's going to end up doing something stupid. That's what you would expect adults to do. These men are all adults, and you would expect them to have common sense and to decide, this is getting out of hand. We've already called the police. Everyone's got these guns. This thing is whole, and he's running all over the place. This thing is getting crazy. Just de-escalate everything. Let's just bring the temperature down on everything. That's what you would expect a person who has compassion, a person who wants to avoid killing somebody, avoid a fatal encounter or someone who's scared, someone who's trying to, I'm doing all of this to try and keep my distance away from getting, give me a break. I mean, it is so transparent what these guys are up to and what they're doing. It's laughable. And again, is the jury buying this? That's the $1 million question. And if they are buying it, why? I would argue it is because of the legacy of white nationalism, where a white man, this is historic, a white man has the right to do this. And if a black person is not compliant, then that means they're suspicious. They're up to something. They're not willing to stop what they're doing and answer my questions. It's because they're a criminal. It's because they're up to something, and they then now have probable cause to detain, call the police, and or shoot them if they need to.
And to get closer to the pickup, to get closer to Dad, to get to the truck, if he's going to try to come to the truck, I will be right there. So I was thinking that he was a threat, that might go after myself, my father, or the truck. I wanted to be right there to deter him or to be able to handle it if I needed to.
So you also could have stepped around the back of the truck and followed him in the path that way. Is that right?
Yes, but then he would have an open, unrestricted run around the truck and into my open door into my pickup truck and could have took the truck.
So you're telling this jury that a man who has spent 5 minutes running away from you, you're now thinking is somehow going to want to continue to engage with you, someone with a shotgun, and your father, a man who's just said, stop or I'll blow your fucking head off, by trying to get in their truck?
That's what it shows, yes ma'am.
All right, I'm going to stop it there, because I want to, it's we're much further in. The testimony goes on for probably another, 8 more minutes that I had there. There's nothing too much more vital that I had, but the point of all of this is not only to sort of talk about and to look at this from the technical aspects of it, but this is why if this jury comes out and acquits these guys, and I'm not even talking about the other guys, because felony murder is something that I'm not sure that a lot of people appreciate or maybe even believe to be something that they should be able to do. So the other guys do not get on the stand, they do not testify. So the father and this guy Bryant, I think of any of the people who might have an opportunity to get away with this, it's going to be the guy Bryant, the guy who's in the car. I don't know specifically the breakdown of the charges of each guy. I think that Roddy Bryant, who again is in the car, he has a different set of charges than the others. I think if he doesn't get felony murder, I could understand that, because it's even though he's a party to this, you could decide, I don't know if this guy is really, whatever. But when we look at this as something that's really cut and dry and seems to be very obviously an unnecessary killing, murder of a man because of these guys who believe that they are going to be cop for a day. This is what we're talking about. There's history behind this. There is the mentality behind this. There is a whole lot of, particularly for the jury now also, there's a whole lot in the mindset of the jury that may see their behavior as acceptable and may go, I can totally understand where this guy's coming from. I don't want these guys to end up life in prison for a mistake. There is a lot of, and we already know that the judge, who I actually like on this as opposed to the Rittenhouse judge, he seems to be a fair broker and seems to be aware of what's going on. However, he's the guy who said it appears to be race appears to be a factor in this jury. The defense going out there and striking all of these black jurors, and he already knew that there appears to be race a part of the jury that has history attached to it. We know that all these acquittals of the deaths of the killings of black men, Emmett Till, it's because there is racism in the jury. There's race a part of the jury. They believe that these guys shouldn't do time for these killings. So we already know that the deck is stacked against the prosecution because of the jury pool. What's his name sort of said, we don't have enough Bubbas in there, which is ridiculous. But because, and by the way, it's ridiculous because there's a whole lot of history of racism in part of juries, not of Bubbas being showing that they are more likely to convict or not convict. So there's just no history there. But anyway, when we think about this thing, possibly these men possibly getting away with this, this is why there's going to be outrage, is because pretty cut and dry, the prosecution did a very good job at showing us that there was opportunity after opportunity after opportunity for these guys to have de-escalated, to have allowed Ahmaud Arbery to live. They chose instead to hunt him, to corner him, and to shoot and kill him if needed. That's why people are calling this a lynching. I wouldn't call it a lynching. Again, I don't believe that this is not the racism of the 1940s and 50s of the time, 60s, the time where, for instance, Emmett Till was killed. This is a different kind of racism that is much more akin, I think, to Howard Beach and to incidents, Bernie Getz, incidents that I remember from the 1980s and going forward. This is more like Trayvon Martin, in my view, than that. And we know that Trayvon Martin's killer got away with it, walked away scot-free for killing Trayvon Martin, who, again, Trayvon Martin got into a fight with this guy. Ahmaud Arbery never even touched him until it came time to engage with this gun. And of course, fighting over the gun is where we end up with this situation of them saying self-defense, self-defense. He even says at a certain point in time, I'm being hit by either Arbery or being hit by the gun in this struggle. So, like with Rittenhouse, he gets my gun, and I can't allow him to get my gun, because if he gets my gun, he's going to use it on me, right? That is the defense of, and I could put it, and let me see if I can cut to just then. I don't think I'll be able to find it, but that's a part of, this is the similarities with Rittenhouse. You go out there and you go armed with a gun or with a machine gun, with a shotgun, with whatever. Then all of a sudden, a person is trying to defend themselves, and then the defense is, if he gets my gun, he's going to use it on me. So you put yourself in this situation of having the weapon to protect yourself, and you're using it to protect yourself. But then, if that person fights back, I have to shoot him and kill him, because if he gets my gun, he's going to kill me. That's the self-defense argument. So, all this to say, if this does not come away with convictions, that is where I'm going to stand, and that's going to be my mindset as to why this is a bad precedent to take. Because you know what, Ahmaud Arbery should be alive today, and he should not be dead. All right, guys, I am going to wrap it up here, but I do want to remind everyone that we do have a Twitter, and we do have a, hold on a second. We do have a Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, the World As I Like. Again, the World As I Like. PayPal for donations, py.pl/1pvcpy. If you want to send a tip to the show, monetary tip, not ideas. But if you do have some ideas for the show, again, the Facebook, the Twitter, or the Instagram at The World As I Like is where you want to go. vtip.com, v-tip.com/-63 to listen to the audio version of this, the podcast, or v-tip.com/-7T as in Thomas. That is you're going to be able to see the entire video of this. If you're watching this on YouTube, for instance, you're only seeing a portion of this. The entire video will be at vtip.com for you to take a look at. Again, this show streams weekdays at stream.vtip.net or at YouTube, which is youtube.com/c/The World As I Like. Alrighty, guys, there might be an audio-only podcast episode this Tuesday or Wednesday. If I don't put it out, forgive me. New show will be up the week after. I hope everyone has a great and lovely Thanksgiving. Happy, I guess it's not too early to say happy holidays. So happy holidays to you and yours, and hopefully you will join me on the next one. Alrighty, take care.